The market stops panicking when the Fed starts panicking. And it's not the government, because you saw during TARP, the market was still panicking until the Fed stepped in and did quantitative easing. I don't think you're wrong, but I think you have to let it play out. You can't be near all-time highs saying that the government's not going to let the stock market go down. The put does not exist now. And when you put Warsh in, the put threshold, the strike, goes much lower than it was under Jerome Powell. I've been tremendously critical on Jerome Powell, and I think that potentially it is good if we decrease the money printing over time. I do not trust Warsh to achieve that goal. But what you have to understand is, as a market participant, if my downside protection strike goes down, if that pain threshold goes down, if in crisis I'm worried about the Fed waiting to see. Jerome Powell was very slow and lethargic when it came to inflation and making moves on interest rates in mostly normal times, like non-crisis moments. When it came to a crisis, he was immediate. He didn't wait for anything. When you combine that with decreasing the Fed balance sheet, which takes money out of the system, maybe more so out of the financial system, not so much the real economy. And the bankers will say, oh, we lend to the real economy. The reason why we haven't had as much inflation as we've had money supply growth is because we're just building leverage throughout the system, right? Asset prices are going up. The money that banks lend is not used by the middle class in order to compete for goods and services. So the opposite is true. If you take money out of the financial system, asset prices will go down more than the real economy will slow. You may be right that this is not how it's going to actually play out, but you have to let the market panic about it. As a market participant, you don't want to be buying all the way down when the trend is against you. And I am thinking that this is a new paradigm shift, the potential for a new trend. We could potentially get a correction here, a lot of skittishness around the confirmation hearings in May, and then forget about it. And then everyone is going to start noticing that there's less money in the financial system because asset prices aren't moving the way that they're supposed to, despite what I believe will be extremely strong numbers, right? I think that earnings, like over the next week, are going to be amazing. So I don't know if that's enough to make the market forget about this. You can't predict the future on these types of things. I just have a conviction that this is an extremely underpriced, misunderstood part of the changing dynamic, which is the macro, which is the most important macro dynamic when it comes to the market as a whole. On Friday, we had Mark Andreessen come out and say that he's known Warsh for 30 years. 1996, when Warsh was a VP, maybe, at Morgan Stanley. Like, okay, you're buds. Besant, Druckenmiller, Hassett, all of the bulls on Warsh came out and the market was still down. The S&P was only down 40%. We sort of saw an internal rotation. But the Qs and the technology inside the S&P went down fairly steeply, 1.2% at the end of the day, another 20 bips in the after hours. The lows of the day was 140 bips, so about the same. That is just a baby sense. Now, what I feel like is the bear case is going to come out on asset prices, and it doesn't need to be as critical on Warsh's career or intelligence as I am, right? I think I'm in the minority there of really doing psychoanalysis on this guy. Like, I don't think you need that. What I do think people are going to start to do is look at his stated policy objectives. The market, the smart guys, understand that rates don't really do as much as we thought they did. I tend to think, in 2022, we were going to have a recession. A lot of people thought that because we went from 0 essentially to 5.5%. And, it was like we just pulled it to the max, basically. That happened extremely quickly, the fastest it's ever happened I think including 1980. So it's really not about rates. It's about the Fed balance sheet. It's about the Powell put. It's about comparing the market's safety under Powell to that under Warsh. And I think you can expect volatility. You don't need to make a big move here, right? You may not be a professional investor. What I'm saying is just consider what I'm saying. If you see the market go down 1%, maybe assess whether this is the dip to buy. Ultimately, over time, there's going to be plenty of dips to buy, right? I am very predisposed to being long, understanding how economies grow over time, and especially how this economy is growing right now. I want to be long, but the most important factor is, in the short term, the monetary environment, the monetary policy, the amount of money that's in the system. And if the market starts pricing in less, I think we get a tremendous amount of volatility. Now, does that change returns over the course of my investing career? I don't know how old you are. Probably not. One major criticism I've had is that the Fed has jacked up asset prices. The multiples are extremely high. The earnings yields are extremely high. So my investing generation, have gotten great returns. But from here, it's easy to imagine, 10 years that are kind of mid, as the kids would say, or 20 years that are mid. I feel extremely bad for Gen Z. They missed Bitcoin, they missed, the mega cap tech wave, they missed Nvidia probably. Then what? They're gonna get all these $1 trillion stocks, being dominant in the world. Like, they're gonna have to pray and hope for a new $1 trillion stock to come out of nowhere and disrupt the big ones. Like, that's a tough environment. If you take a haircut to the market of 20%, and it doesn't have to be a bear market, but it might just be less returns as earnings growth grows more, then you get an entry level to assets that's better. That is what Druckenmiller and Besant are saying. That is why housing prices are so high, that quantitative easing. I get that. I agree with that. The critique is that I think Warsh is the wrong guy to do it, partially because of things that, he really can't control from here, but he's just like a major elitist socialite. He's got his tentacles all throughout the New York elite social circles. And for that guy to be the guy that's doing it, I don't think it's going to go well politically. But also because he's not a quantitative genius. He doesn't understand the thresholds of the repo market and otherwise. And I don't think he has the mental agility in order to react and read and adjust, certainly not like Rick Rieder. So if it is even more painful than it has to be, it was always going to be painful under Warsh, I would just consider, do you want to own assets when the stated goal is to make asset prices more cheap? Trump says he doesn't want to tank the housing market. But when Trump puts him in there, I think it is really I think it's really not understood how little power he has over him. He put Powell in, remember? Everyone's bear case right now seems to be like, oh, it's not going to be independent. First of all, it's never been independent. But yes, this guy's going to be less independent. But it's going to be not to Trump. It's going to be the guys that are currently aligned with Trump, those billionaires. And when they flip on Trump, and they will, especially when they're worried about the next election, it's going to be against Trump's agenda. Because they're going to be going towards the next administration. Maybe they really think Trump's doing a good job and they want to back Rubio or they want to back Vance. But I kind of think we're going to swing to the Democrats. Then you have a guy in Warsh, or maybe they just go neither and they're just like, we need austerity. So that's the long-term understanding of who Kevin Warsh is and how this goes. And I don't think it's good for asset prices. That's it.